Hi guys! Welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel so blessed to be a professional Vedic astrologer. So today I got some inspiration for a video idea about Saturn or Shani when it comes too close to someone's ascendant or aspecting personal planets. So the main thing I want to focus on in this video is Saturn in the first, Saturn aspecting the first, Saturn on the sun, Saturn aspecting the sun, Saturn on the moon, Saturn aspecting the moon, and the energy that this creates for someone's life experience, okay? And this is really important because I always remember my second Vedic astrology teacher, James, who I love so much. In one of the video lessons, he talked about it doesn't matter what's going on in someone's Vedic astrological chart. If they have too much Saturn, if Saturn is really tight on the ascendant, there's always going to be this part of themselves that really holds them back in this lifetime, right? Because Saturn or Shani is the energy of discipline, structure, but it's also can be a very big block to someone's confidence and their self-esteem as well too. So the main point that I want to make in this video is Saturn or Shani being in someone's way is essentially that person getting in their own way. Okay, so let's unravel this. Okay, so Saturn on the ascendant, Saturn aspecting the ascendant, Saturn on the sun, Saturn aspecting the sun, Saturn on the moon, Saturn aspecting the moon. All of these different aspects are really going to create an energy where someone feels like there's a strong Saturnian voice that is always around them, right? Saturn is almost like a strict father or a strict authority figure that is, around someone energetically. And they might get a lot of thoughts like, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, someone else is going to be better, someone else can do this better, and they really hold themselves back a lot in this lifetime, right? So even if someone has this amazing, powerful chart, if they have too much Saturn all over the place and it's really coming close to the ascendant personal planets, they're going to get that Saturnian block that comes in and wants to tell them, don't do this, don't go after that, you're not good enough, you have to wait, someone else is going to be better, it goes on. So the biggest block for those that are overly Saturnian, which doesn't mean that it's bad to have Saturn strong in the chart, it just means that the block that really gets in the way is that voice of Saturn, right? That harsh sort of critic. So the highest octave of Saturn is discipline, structure. Someone, if they have a lot of Saturn influence, they really want to wait to do things until they do it right. That's the higher octave. So if someone has Saturn on the ascendant, they want to really do things in a way that feels right, and they want to take their time, and they want to learn, and they want to get really good at it, But the lower manifestation is never doing anything because that Saturn critic gets too strong. Saturn is almost like a parent or a parental figure that is constantly around someone, and if someone has Saturn, especially I see this the most, I would say if someone has a really strong Saturn in one of the Kendra angle houses, 1, 4, 7, or 10, let's say they have the Saturn Mahaprasha Yoga, for example, I see this a lot where it feels like they have a parental figure that's telling them oh, you can't do that, don't do it like that, you're not doing it right, etc., etc. So I always tell clients when they have a lot of Saturn on them, I say it's like Saturn is on you, meaning it feels like Saturn is always around energetically. They really get in their own way in this lifetime, right? More than anything, they are just standing in their own way. So let's talk about the different manifestations of Saturn on the ascendant versus Saturn with the sun versus Saturn with the moon. I'm not going to go into Saturn, Mercury, Saturn, Venus in this video. I want to mainly focus on the sun, the moon, and the ascendant because those are the main points of someone's personality and their energy in this lifetime. I really want to focus this video there. But obviously there's going to be, a potency of Saturn if someone has Saturn, Mercury, Saturn, Venus, etc. So Saturn on the ascendant or Saturn aspecting the ascendant is the main one you will see where someone really holds themselves back a lot in this lifetime, right? And the reason is because the first house is the self, right? It's how someone comes across, how they appear to the world. And when Saturn aspects that, they come across very Saturnian, right? And that Saturn first house influence is going to cause insecurity issues, issues with confidence, issues with self-worth, issues with not being good enough, and they're really going to hold themselves back in that way. I do find Saturn in its higher form on the ascendant or aspecting the ascendant can make someone very reliable, very structured. You know, you can rely on someone with Saturn on the ascendant to get the job done, but they can also really hold themselves back throughout the whole lifetime, right? I'm not good enough. I don't know, maybe I need to take 10 more courses. Maybe I need to go back to school before I can do it, right? It's going to cause this constant Saturnian influence into the life because the first house is the whole, ascendant. It's the whole life experience. So I find Saturn in the first or aspecting the first to be the strongest, highest manifestation of Saturn influence, where someone is more insecure, hold themselves back, etc. Okay, so that is Saturn on the ascendant or aspecting the ascendant. They have to get out of that Saturnian voice that's always there, right? So Saturn on the sun, or Saturn aspecting the sun, is more so going to be an influence where this can take on the energy of the father. Specifically, was very strict on the person for some reason. They might have been very strict, very disciplined. A lot of criticism could have occurred in the childhood or the upbringing. With all of these, Saturn on the ascendant, Saturn on the sun, or Saturn on the moon, we can see a lot of criticism in the upbringing or with the parents or the life experience. You'll find this very, very often because these are the personal planets, right? Sun is father, moon is the nurturing and the mother, and ascendant is the whole life experience, the whole thing, right? So the ascendant is like, it's all of it, right? So Saturn on the sun can be more so specifically about the father or some sort of father figure or some sort of authority figures when that person was growing up were very strict. And so it made that person not express themselves fully. I have Saturn opposite my sun, and people don't think this about me now because I also have Jupiter aspecting my ascendant, and I'm pretty confident. I feel like I come across very confident for the most part, but when I was younger, I was the most shy, like very, very shy. I didn't like speaking much in school. Like I was very like that. And it was that Saturn sun influence. I would always withdraw, hold myself back. And it was very connected to a lot of like authority figure growing up as well too. So Saturn on the sun or aspecting the sun will be a influence where someone holds themselves back a lot from expression, from expressing themselves, right? The sun is like vitality, it's expression. It's our soul, right? It's that sun energy of the soul. It's Atma. Okay. And usually this comes from a father figure or a parental figure in the upbringing that kind of restricted that person. So Saturn on the sun, they have a whole lifelong experience of learning to express themselves, not hold themselves back. And it usually comes from, some authority figure in the childhood. So that's Saturn on the sun or aspecting the sun. Now, Saturn on the moon or Saturn aspecting the moon, it's more of a depressive sort of aspect, okay? Saturn on the ascendant, someone is just very Saturnian in their energy. They hold themselves back. They're disciplined. They feel very responsible. They feel the weight of the world. They feel like their life happens in a way where it's more slow moving, right? An example of Saturn on the ascendant would be Lana Del Rey, who even though she got vastly successful, it took her so long to get there. Like, she always talks about the fact that she was singing in these like New York bars for like who knows how long, 10 years before she got any sort of success. That's Saturn on the ascendant. It doesn't mean that someone doesn't get success, but it takes a long ways to get there. It takes a lot of time. It's Saturn. It's, that sort of like long road to get somewhere. It's not this get rich quick sort of scheme. It's not Rahu. So that's a very Saturnian sort of life where even now that she is very successful, she gets like snubbed a lot. She doesn't get the recognition. She gets a lot of, criticism. That's because Saturn is in her first house in a strong sign. So she has a Saturnian sort of life experience. Things happen more slowly. Things can be blocked. She comes into herself later on in life, right? Saturn on the ascendant. Now, Saturn on the sun is like someone's expression, their confidence, their ability to express gets that Saturn influence. And then the father, because the sun is the karaka for the father, getting that Saturn influence, okay? Saturn on the moon is someone's emotions, the mother, their mind. The moon is manas, right? So it is the mental energy is now getting a Saturnian influence and aspect onto it. So see how all these different main points of life, the ascendant is, someone's whole life. Sun is their vitality, it's the father, it's authority, etc. That's getting the Saturn influence. Now, the moon is more emotional, it's more subconscious, and it's connected to the nurturing and the upbringing, right? So now we get Saturn influence onto the moon, and this is more of that like depression or depressive aspect, right? So Saturn on the moon would be someone who naturally thinks or views things in a very Saturnian way. So if you've ever met someone who, kind of has that like, how do I explain this properly without offending anyone who has Saturn with the moon? Someone who naturally has a more negative or practical view on life, that would be more Saturn on the moon. They might think in a way that is very Saturnian because that is the moon, right? It's not Jupiter on the moon, it's not Venus on the moon, it's Saturn. So they naturally go towards a more pessimistic, practical, pragmatic viewpoint of life because that's the emotional, subconscious nature, right? Saturn on the moon can be someone who's like, oh, things just never really work out for me. It's more of that Saturnian viewpoint, right? Because it's affecting the mind, the subconscious, the nurturing, the upbringing. And there could have been a lot of experiences in the childhood, perhaps connected to the mother or women, where they saw someone who was very Saturnian, or there was a lot of like strictness from the mother or nurturing as well too. So Saturn on the moon, the biggest block is going to be someone's more negative, harsh, or depressive, thoughts. Because if we think about the moon, it's more mental. It's that mental energy. So it's different than Saturn on the ascendant. It's different than Saturn on the sun. They still have this strong Saturnian voice, but it's more depressive. Like whenever I see Saturn on the moon, especially if it's really tight or aspecting the moon, I always ask them if they've struggled with a lot of like depression in their life or lower thinking or heavy thoughts. And I would say 90% of the time they're like, yeah, because Saturn is so closely influencing that mind, that mental energy. And so also Saturn on the moon can be that someone gets stuck in these like Saturnian thoughts, like, oh, I don't know if I could be, it can be very like that downer sort of energy. It's not like Jupiter on the moon where someone's like, everything's always going to work out. It's not like Venus on the moon where someone thinks in a way that's like beautiful and they love pleasure. It's Saturn. So we get that Saturnian influence. And it can really connect to the upbringing and the nurturing that they experienced from a young age. So it's very interesting because these are the three sort of foundational aspects of a chart, right? Ascendant, sun, moon. These are the main points of like how is someone's life experience going to unfold, because these are huge parts of someone's life, right? The ascendant is how they come across, their whole life experience. The sun is someone's vitality, it's their energy, it's their soul, it's the father, it's father-like figures, it's authority. And then the moon is the emotions, the subconscious, manas, the mind, women, nurturing, etc. So these are three like huge points of someone's whole life experience. And when Saturn influences any of these points strongly, right? I'm not talking about Saturn aspecting the ascendant, but it's not that tight. And then Venus aspects and Jupiter aspects the ascendant. It's not going to be as harsh. Let's say Saturn is like just aspecting the ascendant and it's tight in degree and it's in a strong sign. Someone is going to really feel that Saturn influence, right? If Saturn is very tightly conjunct or opposite the sun and it's really tight and they don't have a lot of other benefics, someone really feels that Saturn on the sun, right? They're going to feel like they were restricted in the upbringing. They're going to feel like they hold themselves back, especially in the house that it pertains to. They're going to feel like, a lot of Saturn in their life experience. Things happen more slowly. They like to take the more, slow sort of path to get somewhere. Saturn's on the moon, the mind, the mental energy, the thoughts are more Saturn. It's more depressive, it's a little bit heavier. And again, that would be felt stronger if Saturn is like really tight in aspect to the moon, and if they don't have like a bunch of other benefics also aspecting the moon. So obviously, Vedic astrology is a deeply complex analysis. It's not just like, oh, it's this and it's this and it's this. If you guys watch my full in-depth chart analysis videos, you see how insanely complex true chart analysis is. But this is like trying to, bring some clarity to something that is complex, and me trying to simplify it, which I feel like is my whole life story with Sun, Rahu, and Virgo. I'm always trying to take something very complex and simplify it. But Saturn influence is going to be felt in someone's life experience, right? If there's a lot of Saturn influencing these planets, the ascendant, the sun, the moon, someone feels Saturn. They feel like life is a little bit slower to happen for them. They feel like they have a constant Saturnian voice that you're not good enough, you're not going to do this, you should wait until you're better at it, wait and wait. So the reason I thought this video was so important is because no matter how strong someone's chart is for potential, if they have too much Saturn going on, they're going to always hold themselves back. And it's really important to tell someone that, because when someone is aware of that and someone is conscious of that, it actually can really change their life experience, because they're understanding like what's holding them back. And usually it's just themselves, right? It's just their own critic, that own Saturnian sort of voice that is holding them back. I remember I had a client not that long ago, and she had Saturn like all over her. It was like on the ascendant, aspecting the sun. She was in a Saturn dasha. I think her Atmakarka was Saturn. And I told her about this, and she was like, whoa. Like her mind was blown, because she was like, this is my whole life experience, but I never knew how to put it into language. So astrology is basically a translation of taking something that is someone's life experience or life story and putting it into these different terms, essentially. When someone knows about that really strong Saturn influence in their life, they can start to be conscious of it and start to be aware of it and be like, you know what, no, like I'm not going to let Saturn hold me back. I'm just going to go after it. I'm just going to do it. So again, I have Saturn really tightly aspecting my sun, and again, like there's a duality in my chart because I have a very strong Jupiter aspecting my first house. So more often than not, I go towards the things I want to go towards. But sometimes that Saturn can really come in and I'm like, no, I need to wait. I'm going to take 10 more classes before, like it's good in the way that for me, like I take my work very seriously. Like Saturn is on my sun, and I studied astrology since I was 13, and I never wanted to do it professionally because I was like, I'm not good enough, so it made me really take my time to study and train, etc., etc. That's the benefit of Saturn influence, is you really want to do things well when you do them. But at the same time, I have to get out of that Saturn voice sometimes and be like, just do it, right? I want to make content, and then I'm like waiting, and I'm like planning, and I'm like, the lighting's off, and then it's this, and then it's that. And so then I have to remind myself, like, okay, don't let that Saturn voice stop you. So Saturn can be it can be like a harsh critic that's always there, and you have to try to like get out of that and be like, you know what, I don't have to do this perfectly, but I just have to do it. So I always tell clients, if they have a lot of Saturn influence, not just, again, it really depends how tight Saturn is aspecting personal planets and how many other benefics versus malefics are aspecting the sun, the moon, the ascendant. But for the most part, when Saturn gets close to the ascendant, the Saturn, the moon, they will have that sort of harsh critic that holds them back so much in this lifetime. And it's really important to know that and try to silence that voice and just do things, right? And something that really helps me with Saturn, or helps clients when I explain Saturn, is think about it like this. It's actually selfish to like hold yourself back and not do all the things that you're gifted at or talented at because you're thinking too much about how you're not good enough and someone else is better. And it can be self-focused in a way, right? So if you view it like that and you're like, why am I sitting thinking about myself? Like if you think about Saturn being this like harsh critic, if you're actually sitting all day and you're just like thinking about how you're not good enough and I can't do this and blah, 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 you're actually just sitting there thinking about yourself. And you need to get out of that and just do things and produce things and see where it leads. So that really helps with a lot of Saturnian influence, is like getting out of that self-focused critical energy and just doing something and taking those steps, getting yourself out there, and you can refine and perfect things as you go, right? For example, for, my content, I don't have a ton of expensive equipment. I just kind of film, with what I have. Lord knows that Saturn on my sun could sit and, tear apart everything and be like, I need to do this and it needs to be like this. But I just like film, I record my videos, I put it out there, and you know what? It's been so amazing because I get so many clients through YouTube, through TikTok, etc. But it's not like my content is perfect by any means, right? So it's like if you have that strong Saturn voice and that strong Saturn influence, you just have to do things. You just have to get the ball rolling, and you have to try not to like sit around and wait forever, right? And another important part of Saturn influence is, Saturn is very spiritual, which is actually something that people don't really often connect Saturn to, right? We think of Saturn or Shani as maybe more structured and disciplined and less spiritual, but Saturn is like that disciplined spirituality. So Saturn is like, okay, I can sit and meditate, I can sit and dedicate myself to some sort of spiritual practice. So Saturn influence on personal planets, sun, moon, or the ascendant can actually create a very spiritual sort of personality and can give someone a lot of wisdom. It's different than like Jupiterian wisdom. It's more, a little bit more practical spiritual wisdom, but you will find that people with a lot of Saturnian influence, Saturn at Makarka, Saturn on the personal planet, Saturn on the ascendant, they do have a very innate wisdom and spirituality about them as well too. So I wanted to talk about this because I think it's really important actually to know that if you have a lot of strong Saturn influence in your chart, you have to get out of your own way. That's what I always tell clients, and they either laugh and they're like, no, that's literally it, or they feel very enlightened by that because they're like, you know what, that's been my whole life and I don't know what it is, but you just put it into verbiage, right? So Saturn is always going to be this like sort of, I see Saturn as a force or an energy of sorts that is trying to like stop or block someone from reaching that full potential. And it's not because Saturn is like negative, it's just because Saturn is, critical and can be harsh, and Saturn is discipline. And so it's sort of like stopping someone from stepping into that full potential a lot of the times. And it's really important to get out of that and get out of the loop of like, well, I'll just wait until I'm, better at this, and I'm just going to wait and I'm just going to wait. It's like Saturn can really be like that, especially Saturn on the ascendant. I feel like I see Saturn influence the strongest when it's on the ascendant very tightly, aspecting someone's first house or their first ruler. That's when someone really feels Saturn, but again, it's going to apply to the sun and moon influence as well too. So if you do have strong Saturn influence in your chart, Saturn at Makarka is actually another one where I see this as well too. You have to really just get out of your own way, and you have to realize that a lot of your problems in this lifetime come from getting in your own way. All right, it's very real, and I see it so often in charts that are very Saturn influenced. All right, so let me know if you guys have Saturn strong in your Vedic astrological chart on the ascendant, aspecting the ascendant with the sun, aspecting the sun, or with the moon. And remember, Saturn does create special aspects. So Saturn aspects houses that are 7 away, as well as 3 away, as well as 10 away. So Saturn does create these different aspects in the chart through the Vedic system as well too. All right, and I felt Saturn around me while I was filming this because I was like, I just have to get to the point. I just have to be clear. I just have to be concise. Even though my Gemini ascendant wants to, go on a bunch of tangents, I felt Saturn just being like, get to the point of the video. So let me know where you guys have strong Saturn influence. If you do have strong Saturn, if you don't have strong Saturn, and how that has unfolded for you. And do you find that a lot of the times you just kind of get in your own way in this lifetime, right? You stop yourself from doing the things you want to do, and it's like there's always this harsh sort of critic around someone when there's a lot of Saturn. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment, like, and subscribe to let me know how your Saturn influence has played out for you in this lifetime. And, this was a quick little video about Saturn or Shani, but I will have more content coming soon as well, too. Alright, sending all the love. Bye, guys.